I work at a big company, and I can earn enough for both of us, so don't worry, Eric said during our engagement. But as soon as we got married, he changed. He and Larry started insulting me every day. On top of that, Eric took control of all the money and cut down on living expenses. He constantly complained even though I did all the cooking. Fed up, I told Eric I wanted a divorce and left the house. Later, I bumped into Larry by chance. "Hey, I heard you're getting a divorce now," he said. I was surprised and replied, "You must be mistaking me for someone else." Larry smirked and said, "Don't pretend. We're not together anymore, so don't come to me about money. I won't lend you a cent. Remember that." Before I could respond, he disappeared into the crowd. I lowered my head, feeling the stares of people passing by, and started to laugh. Poor guy, he knows nothing. I can't wait to see his reaction when he finds out the truth. I'm Michelle, a 53-year-old housewife. I married Eric 7 years ago. When we met, Eric seemed like a great guy. We met at a gathering of friends, and I found him fun and friendly. As we said goodbye, he asked if we could meet just the two of us next time. Feeling a bit sad about parting, I agreed. When we started dating, he mentioned he had a son named Larry from his previous marriage. Larry was in 5th grade then, and we had dinner together a few times. He was a bright and pleasant boy, just like his dad. A year later, on the night Eric proposed, I decided to open up. You know, I live with my parents and work part-time, right? The company I joined right after graduation was really tough, and it ruined my health, I said. Is that so? It must have been hard to quit, Eric replied. I think long hours will be difficult for me in the future, I added. Eric smiled kindly and said, "Don't worry about it. Just stay at home. I work at a big company, and I can earn enough for both of us." Relieved by his words, I accepted his proposal. I was happy to have met a good man and thought we were starting a happy married life. I never imagined I would feel so hopeless in less than half a year. As we got used to living as a family of 3, Eric and Larry's attitudes changed a lot. They started making fun of everything I did and said, "Mom, are you in bed again? Where's my sandwich?" Larry asked with a frown as he came into the bedroom before school. I had been helping with a wedding at a nearby park yesterday and felt sick because it was an unusually hot day. I had already been feeling unwell since the day before. I had asked Eric for help, but he refused with an annoyed look and said, "Being a housewife must be nice, just slacking off all day. I need my days off too, you know. Let me rest." The next morning I couldn't get up because I had pushed myself too hard. I apologized to Larry and said, "Sorry, Larry. I couldn't make your sandwich. Here's some money to buy one at the grocery store." Larry complained, "Mom, can't you at least make a sandwich? You always take shortcuts with frozen food or leftovers. You're failing as a mom if you can't even cook." His words hurt. "Don't blame Mom, Larry," Eric said with a half smile as he passed by in the hallway. "Since you skipped the sandwich, tonight's dinner must be fancy." "Oh, is that so? Then I'll look forward to it. Being a housewife, you should have plenty of time for dinner, right? You're not sleeping all day, are you? Make sure to clean thoroughly without slacking." The two of them laughed at my poor condition and made their insensitive comments before leaving as if I could prepare a fancy meal. Lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, I let out a heavy sigh. Eric is extremely stingy, despite being a section chief at a big company and earning a high salary. The money he gave me for living expenses was ridiculously low. It's my salary, so why should my wife manage it? Eric insisted on managing the finances himself after we got married, and I meekly agreed. I thought it didn't matter who handled the money as long as it was done properly. But then Eric started spending money as he pleased. It's necessary for work. Drinking expenses are business expenses. It's essential, he would say as an excuse to buy expensive clothes and watches for himself. But he would make a sour face even if I needed something small. When I bought cheap snacks, Eric would get angry because he believed a housewife doesn't need any spending money. I had to ask for his permission every time I wanted to spend money, whether it was for a haircut or buying clothes. One pair of jeans is enough, isn't it? You're buying more, he would ask. I replied, I want a warm pair for winter. He said, fine, but get them from a cheap store. I also wanted to go to the hair salon regularly. Can I go once every 3 months to keep my hairstyle? I asked. Eric scoffed. Why do you need to be fashionable? If you keep your hair long, you only need to cut it once every 7 months. No more haircuts. Because of this, I was only allowed to buy cheap makeup from drugstores. I wanted to use better products because the cheap ones were harsh on my skin. But Eric didn't care. The money Eric gave for living expenses was very low, about 1/3 of what most people spent. With this small budget, it was hard to maintain a balanced diet. When I complained, Eric responded smugly. On the TV show about saving money, they lived on this amount. They had a farmer relative who gave them vegetables and bread. I told him, that's not possible with these high prices. He replied, that's your job to manage. What really hurt me was how Eric acted when it came to sending a wreath for my dad's funeral. When Dad, who had been sick, passed away, and it was time to send a wreath, Eric frowned and said, we don't need to send a wreath for the funeral, right? Only the main mourners need to send one. He suggested, use your savings. It's not my problem. As I prepared for the funeral with tears in my eyes, his lack of care made me angry. I said, I never planned to ask you for it. So don't worry, he replied. Good, but do Larry and I really have to go? It'll ruin our long weekend, right? Dad, Larry added, I wanted to play a new game. Although they complained, I didn't doubt they would come. However, Eric and Larry arrived late to the funeral, barely greeted my mom and relatives, and left quickly. My mom, who was very tired, didn't have the energy to get upset, but my relatives were furious. What's going on, Eric? Your wife's father died, and you're acting so cold. Larry, you've received so many gifts and allowances from Michelle's dad, they said. While I apologized to my relatives, I felt my love for Eric and Larry quickly fading. Eric, always in his stylish suits with a charming presence, and Larry, attending a prestigious university and seen as a handsome father and son by the neighbors, only insulted me at home. They wouldn't come straight home after work or school, instead wandering around and coming back with the smell of lipstick and perfume. Despite doing whatever they wanted, they treated me like a maid, demanding a fancy meal with the little money I had for food. When I served dishes with chicken or pork, both Eric and Larry would glare at me with disdain and insult me. Don't you want to serve your husband good food after he comes home from work? If I get sick from eating this bad food, how will you take responsibility? Are you even a mom? They would say. I could make delicious meals even with chicken or pork. They disliked vegetables and fish, but eating such a picky diet will make you sick, Eric would reply. I'd eat if it were high quality. Don't complain when you can't satisfy us. I don't need advice from someone as weak as you. They used to eat while complaining, but lately, they just left the food untouched. Yet if I didn't cook, they would yell, are you slacking off even though you're a wife? I would eat the leftovers for breakfast or lunch the next day, but tears would well up as I wondered for whom I was cooking their meals. They relied on store-bought sandwiches, instant noodles, and snacks eventually. Eric was diagnosed with prediabetes during a company health check, and Larry started gaining weight. It was inevitable. Then they lashed out at me, saying, "What kind of wife makes her husband and child sick? We don't need a useless person like you. We're getting a divorce." "Then I'll leave," I said. They were surprised when I agreed easily. "Are you sure you're unemployed? You've been living off me. How will you survive now?" Eric asked. "Don't worry about me. I'll send the divorce papers for you to sign later. Please leave my stuff until the movers come to pick it up," I replied. "Nobody's going to take your stuff," Eric sneered. "You'll definitely regret divorcing a high-earning, handsome guy like me. A kind husband who let you be a housewife with 3 meals and naps. There's no one else like that in the world, right?" "That's right, you've been living in luxury on Dad's money till now. You'll struggle from here on," Larry added as I packed my clothes into a suitcase. Eric and Larry kept talking behind me. Honestly, I admired Eric's ability to overestimate himself so much when we were dating. I saw this part of him as confident and shining. "You'll just go back to your parents, right? Say hi to your retired mom for me. You two will be heading straight to poverty," Eric said. Larry laughed at his father's prediction. "They'll end up on welfare soon. They already reek of poverty, but with Grandma, it'll be the ultimate." The funeral the other day was nothing special. It smelled like poverty. I thought so too, like a poor family's funeral. "I want a fancy one," Larry agreed. But for Dad, who works at a big company, and me attending a prestigious university, poverty is a different world. Their endless comments made me really angry, but I knew it was pointless to argue, so I just let it go. After I went back home and explained everything to Mom, she said in a low voice, "At the funeral, seeing Eric and Larry, I felt something was wrong, but I thought it's not good to interfere too much in my daughter's household, so I kept quiet. I was too busy taking care of Dad." "I'm sorry for barging in like that," I replied. "It's okay. I've been lonely without you. Why don't you stay here?" Mom's concern was comforting, but I knew living with her might make me too dependent. Living nearby and visiting sometimes seemed like the right balance. Yes, Eric and Larry mocked me for being unemployed, but actually I had been working from home. It all started with the budget recipes I posted on my blog. After getting many positive comments, I bravely launched a cooking site and shared my recipes, which quickly gained readers and internet fame. Soon after, an editor from a major publisher approached me, and now I'm getting ready to publish a cookbook. Because of this, I didn't have time to think much about the divorce, and the days flew by. One day, my phone rang insistently. I stopped stirring the ingredients in the pan and answered, "Hello." "Hey, what's this about a clause for the divorce trial?" Eric asked. I sighed, knowing it was about that. "You and Larry insulted me all the time," I said. "Oh, I thought, never mind," Eric said with relief in his voice. "I didn't cheat or anything, you know. Did you record me and Larry?" "Your memory alone won't work," I replied. "I've noted everything in my diary. Try to claim otherwise if you can." Eric scoffed. "Really, poor people and their obsession with money. You're so stingy. If you think you can get a deposit for the divorce trial, go ahead." After his outburst, Eric hung up. I finished cooking and then visited a detective agency to investigate Eric's background. Soon, his affair with a coworker was uncovered. The day after, I sent photos of the two of them together and the investigation report to his company. Eric contacted me again. "You spread this at work is low." The angry manager reported it to the higher-ups, and now I'm in trouble, he said. "I'm fired." "Oh, she was the manager's daughter, wasn't she?" "It's your fault for cheating, knowing they're strict about such things," I said, laughing. "But you should be fine, right?" With all the savings you did, you must have plenty of money, I continued. Larry moved into a dorm this spring because commuting was tough. I prepaid dorm fees and have apartment loans. My savings were drained by that woman. She was two-timing me with a younger guy, Eric replied. Sounds tough for you, but it's none of my concern. Oh, and about the divorce trial deposit, I'll also take half the value of the apartment for property distribution. When the invoice arrives, please transfer the full amount to my account, I said. Eric was yelling on the other end, but I hung up without caring. One day, while returning from shopping in town, I bumped into Larry. He was dressed in his usual flashy clothes, with piercings all over his face and an eye-catching hairstyle, making him easy to spot from a distance. Seeing me, Larry raised his hand in greeting. Hey, I heard you're getting government assistance now, he said. I looked puzzled. Huh, who are you mistaking me for? Don't pretend, Larry said, smirking. It's obvious where an unemployed old lady like you would end up. If you had just followed me and Dad, you'd still be living a comfortable life. It's pathetic. Feeling really angry, I couldn't help but reply, getting government help is a citizen's right. Any one of us could need it someday due to illness or an accident. It's wrong to look down on that. Yeah. So you're saying you're getting it too? Larry said, smirking and pointing his finger at me. Listen, you and I are estranged. Don't come crying to me for money. Remember that, as I opened my mouth to reply, he turned his back and disappeared into the crowd. I lowered my head, conscious of the states of passers, by shaking my shoulders. I couldn't help but laugh. It was just too ridiculous. Poor thing, he knows nothing. I can't wait to see his reaction when he finds out the truth. A few days later, I woke up to find an unbelievable number of missed calls from Larry. Reluctantly, I called back. Larry shouted furiously, "You deceived me, old woman." What are you talking about? I've heard from a cousin. You got 3 high-rise apartments from Grandpa's inheritance and are living a carefree life. Hiding that and getting a divorce is cowardly, he said. That's my personal asset. Why should I share it? I have to tell you or Eric. It's joint property. You should have done a distribution of property with Dad during the divorce. Unfortunately, it became mine after the divorce procedures, so I can't give it to Eric officially. I knew from Dad's will that it would be mine, but I delayed the process until after the divorce because I didn't want to share it with Eric. Larry shouted in frustration. A rich woman like you getting government help. I'll report you to the authorities right now. Feel free, I replied. It's not me but Eric who is receiving it. Larry fell silent. What I told you last time, it's not me, I explained, as if talking to a child. Honestly, even without the inheritance, I can live well. I have income from my cooking website and book sales, which I started secretly. But Eric, after spending all his money on his affair, has lots of bills piling up and is borrowing heavily. Are you listening? Dad's on government assistance now, I said, pulling the phone away from my ear as Larry screamed. Waiting for him to calm down, I continued, You really didn't know anything. He's too proud to tell his son. According to relatives, he asked for money. He's behind on his apartment rent and facing eviction. Staying at home all day in an old apartment. If you're worried, why don't you contact him? There was silence on the other end for a while. Then Larry said resentfully, You're cold-hearted. After all Dad did for you, you have no intention of repaying him. If you have money, you should give some to Dad. Why should I? I said, Since our marriage, it's been nothing but unpleasant memories. I don't feel like I owe him anything, I stated coldly. If you're so concerned, why don't you, his son, lend him money? You're working part-time, after all. I don't have savings. The part-time pay goes to hanging out with friends and stuff, Larry said, suddenly evasive. I smirked. You've been living quite lavishly for a student. Borrowing money to hang out at clubs is not a good idea. How do you know that? He asked. The other day in town, I saw you from across the street after we parted. You met up with a girl at a club and went into a brand store arm in arm. Also, a club membership card was left at the house. Using my credit card for shopping without my permission is out of the question, Larry stammered. That's unfair. You got high-rise apartments from Grandpa. Why don't I or Dad get a share? This is discrimination. Yeah, the credit card bill will be sent soon. Make sure you pay it before it's due, I replied. Before I could finish, the call was disconnected. I sighed and ended the call too. Just when I thought it was all over, a few months later, Eric and Larry showed up at my parents' house without any notice. The doorbell rang nonstop, and when I answered, there they were, expecting they came to ask for money. I let them in to avoid causing a scene in the neighborhood. Eric and Larry, who used to look so stylish, now appeared completely different. Wearing wrinkled shirts and dirty pants, with lifeless and gaunt eyes, yet they still had the energy to be sarcastic. As they walked into the living room, Eric looked around and sneered, "Same old house, huh? Why not sell one of those high-rise apartments and rebuild this place? Do something nice for Mom, living miserably on her pension. This is Dad's house, and we like it this way. More importantly, when are you two planning to pay me back?" "You're past the deadline," I said. Eric, lifting his chin arrogantly, replied, "Michelle, I'll forgive you now. So let's remarry. You started a cooking site, right? If you manage the household perfectly, I'll even let you work, so come back." Such a generous dad, forgiving the wife who abandoned her husband and child. So Mom, why not live with Dad again? Living with just two women must be insecure. Stunned, I was speechless after a moment. Intense anger welled up inside me. Don't joke with me. How much more do you plan to ridicule and fool me? I shouted at the astonished Eric and Larry. After treating me like nothing more than a housekeeper, insulting me, not providing proper living expenses, and then kicking me out, now you want me back just because you found out I inherited high-rise apartments. No way. What, you're going to abandon us? Rich people really are stingy, knowing we're struggling with money and still demanding pay. You're heartless. You were poor yourself until recently. Don't get cocky, Eric retorted in the middle of the argument. Mom returned from shopping. Eric and Larry immediately started buttering her up. "Please lend us some money. We'll probably pay it back. Besides, isn't it unfair that only Michelle gets Grandpa's inheritance? Give me one of the high-rise apartments too." "Hi, Grandma. Long time no see." "How have you been, Grandma? Please persuade Mom to remarry Dad. He doesn't want to break up, but Mom is being stubborn." Mom, surprised at first, changed her expression upon hearing their words. She placed her shopping bag on the floor and let out a deep sigh. "So shameless, both of you," she said. "What?" Eric and Larry responded, confused. "I'm telling you to have some shame," Mom shouted suddenly. Startled by her loud voice, Eric and Larry were understandably confused. Mom usually never scolded them sharply. "I've heard everything about the divorce from Michelle. I can't believe you have the nerve to show up here," Mom said firmly. No, Michelle's exaggerating. You have to listen to our side too," Eric said quickly. "That's right, Grandma. Mom is quite the liar," Larry added. "I remember how well you two behaved at my husband's funeral." Mom cut off Larry's words sternly. "Not greeting me or the relatives, yawning through the service, and leaving before the coffin was sent off. And now you dare ask for his inheritance. Go back to sleep. She drove them to the front door and glared at them one last time. You two are now strangers to us. Don't come here again. If you do, I'll call the police. Mom threw their shoes out the door, forcing them to leave in their socks, and immediately locked the front door. Eric, who had been avoiding paying me, was advised by his lawyer that a lawsuit would cost even more. Reluctantly, he finally transferred the money to my account. Even though Eric was fired from his job, he couldn't find another one. His in-laws, hearing about his situation, for relatives stepped in to cover his debts. They visited my parents' house and apologized profusely for Eric's behavior. Later, Eric, having given up on finding a new job, returned to the countryside, pretending he was helping with the family's farming. However, the story of our divorce spread through the village, leading both children and elders to point and laugh at him. There's thrifty Uncle Eric, even with a degree from a good university and a job at a big company. What's the use if your wife leaves you for being too arrogant? They would say. The reason for his divorce from his first wife was all his reckless spending. He'll never change. Being mocked by the villagers was embarrassing. Eric kept sending me persistent messages asking to remarry to save face, so I deleted his contact. His mistress, apparently no longer interested after the money ran out, had long since left him. I found her with the detective's help and made sure she paid the divorce trial security deposit. I also made Larry pay back the money he used on the credit card without permission. Even though he was enrolled in a prestigious university and was on track to become successful like his father, Larry started skipping classes and fooling around. This led to failing grades and eventually getting expelled. His friends and girlfriends were worried, but Larry in his arrogance pushed them away with his prideful comments. He then had a big fight with Eric, saying, "You're my father, but you won't help pay off the debt." Now they don't talk to each other. Larry lives alone in a small apartment, getting by with part-time jobs. Gone are the days of buying whatever he wanted and making sarcastic remarks despite his high earnings. For me, it's a refreshing change. My cooking website is doing well, and I signed a book deal. I moved to the top floor of the high-rise apartment I inherited from Dad. Mom is still healthy at 75, and the high-rise is close to our family home, so it's convenient if she needs anything. I'm planning a surprise hot spring trip for Mom's upcoming birthday. Though my marriage didn't work out, I want to keep having a good relationship with Mom.